My toe! Hey, I'm going to be doing a book haul for you guys. I bought 20 books, but a lot of them are from websites that are kind of like thrift stores, so they're about half the price, with the exception of like 2 Amazon books, but you know what? It's still a lot cheaper than Barnes & Noble, so... Now I want to give a disclaimer. I can't really explain what each book is about because I myself do not like to enter a book knowing everything about it. I like to have some mystery into it just because I'm not a very emotional person, so knowing too much of the synopsis kind of ruins it for me. And I mean this by like when people tell me, oh, the ending is sad or there's a plot twist, I find that as a spoiler because now I am mentally and emotionally prepared to kind of face that in the plot. So for this reason, I'm gonna be pretty horrible in describing some of the synopsis, but I mean, try to not know much about your books and see if your experience is any better or worse. The first book that I have is a Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson. What I mean to say is Margaret Rogerson. I missed a whole syllable. I cannot tell you, we're already off to a good start, but I cannot tell you a lot about this book. What I can tell you though is that it is a standalone, and I believe this is the second novel from Rogerson. It is a YA fantasy, and some things that I know about it is that it follows this girl who is a librarian that works in this magical library. There's some kind of injustice that she needs to go fight, and then she is stuck with 2 males. I think one of them is like a demon, and I feel like there's possibly a hate to love relationship in this. I feel like I just made that up. Really, the only reason why I got this book is because of the next book I'm gonna mention, which is An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. So this is a YA romance fantasy. It is a standalone. Since I read this book, I can describe the synopsis to you a little better. This follows a very talented portrait artist called Isabel, who is highly sought by the Fae in this magical world where the Fae is like at the top of the social hierarchy. The reason why Isabel lives in this world is because although humans are very mistreated by the Fae, they're important because the Fae are pretty useless. Only the humans can do something that they cannot, which is the ability to create, and I mean anything, such as books, art, music, like absolutely anything. Really, the Fae's life really just involved being consumed by their superficiality, terrorizing the humans, causing unnecessary drama, and really just being there as a decoration. A few people come to mind with that description. So due to their uselessness and consumerist mentality, humans are very much needed in this world. So basically one day, Isabel is given the chance to do a portrait for the Autumn Prince called Rook. Rook is a very powerful Fae prince who has the ability to shapeshift, one of them being a raven. And now Rook isn't like other girls, which is something that Isabel realizes while she is taking her very sweet time painting him. Now here's a disclaimer. If you're not into love at first sight, I do not recommend this book because Isabel was basically on her knees when she met him. So during her experience painting Rook, she realized that she was having a lot of trouble really capturing the authenticity of his eyes. And the reason for this is because his eyes displayed a human emotion, which is something that the Fae are incapable of feeling. They view that as a weakness. So unfortunately for Rook, the first time he ever saw this painting completed was when it was displayed in front of his whole court, and they saw that Isabel portrayed an emotion of sorrow in his eyes. So when he saw this, you can say he got his feathers ruffled. Sorry. And he flew to Isabel, where he basically dragged her out of her house so she can go to the Autumn Court and say that she was purposely trying to sabotage his reputation, even though that isn't true. Long story short, this story follows Rook and Isabel in their journey to the Autumn Court. Obviously, many things happen, then emotions blossom. The next book that I have here is A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Bridget Kemmer. Me as a title. Alright, I could put on my clown shoes and try to pull a synopsis out of my ass, but I don't know anything of this book, honestly. She made me do it. The fourth book is Starsight by Brandon Sanderson, which is a sequel to the first book in his series called Skyward. This is a YA science fiction series. For obvious reasons, I cannot explain to you the synopsis of this book without spoiling you, but I can give you a brief summary of what the first book is about and maybe you'll be interested. So Skyward is set in a world where the humans are forced to live underground because they are constantly being attacked by this alien force from above. Now, in order to combat these attacks, they have have a group of people who are pilots and are trained to combat these aliens, and the protagonist really wants to pursue this profession. In fact, I think she takes after her father, who was considered to be one of the most iconic pilots of his time until he wasn't. The reason for this is because while he was fighting in the biggest battle, he just dipped. And then when he came back, he was fighting against his team, and for that reason they were ordered to kill her father, and basically after that he was titled to be a traitor and a coward. So logically they associate these terms or titles to the protagonist Spencer, their mind. It amazes me. Basically the plot follows Spencer trying to combat these preconceptions about her. She also wants to prove people wrong because she does not believe the whole story of her father being a traitor. Give this series a try if you have not yet already. Especially if you're trying to get into like science fiction or Brandon Sanderson in general, I think this is a great series to start with because this is also my first introduction to this author. The next book that I have is Our Dark Duet by Victoria Schwab. This is the second book in the Monsters of Verity duology. The first book is called This Savage Song, which I'm pretty sure everyone and their mom has heard of that series. I'm kind of late into this, but for obvious reasons, I cannot give you the synopsis for this book either. However, I can give you the synopsis for the first book if you are interested. So This Savage Song is set in a world where the sins of others can manifest into physical monsters. Now, depending on the severity of the sin, it predicts what kind of monster it will be, because really it just goes from bad, worse to horrible. So the first one is the Corsai. They are wrath-like creatures who are born from non-lethal acts of violence. The next are the Malkai. Now they have ember red eyes and they have dark bones that are visible through translucent skin. They are born out of murders and they like to feed on blood. And the final one are the Sunsai, which are the most deceiving because they can appear completely human. The only thing that gives them away is that they have like tally marks in their skin as if it were tattoos, and these tally mark tattoos indicate when was the last time the Sunsai gave into darkness. They are the most powerful and they are born from mass devastation. This is also what one of the main characters of this series is. They consume souls through the power of music. Now you could play a violin like the main character, you could sing, just play anything, but music basically lifts the soul of the listener and they're able to consume it. So this is set in a city called Verity, where it is split in half by two rulers who absolutely hate each other. And this is a dual perspective book where we follow one of the children from each ruler. The first is a human called Kate Harker, who really wants to prove that she can be as ruthless and cold-hearted as her father. The second character is August Flynn, who is a monster but wants to prove that he still has some kind of humanity in him and that he is caring. And basically this story follows August and Kate, who are supposed to be enemies, but they actually have to end up working together. The next book that I have is The Sacred Lies of Minnow Bly by Stephanie Oakes. This is a YA mystery thriller. Honestly, I was kind of in the fence about this book, but now it's the one that I am probably the most excited to read about. This book follows a girl called Minnow Bly who was part of a cult and was isolated from society really all her life. For many years of her life, all she really knew was this community that she was born into, until she finds herself recounting the events that led her to be investigated by an FBI agent. The reason why this book interests me is because I get the impression that the protagonist is very unreliable in her narrative, and the reason why I say this is because of what it says in the back of this book. I'll just read it to you because I feel like you have a better understanding of what this book is about and what I mean. So it says, "He watches me a moment, and I wonder if he can read in my expression that I will never tell him the truth. I'll give him the version of events, a half-truth. But I haven't told anyone what happened in those smoke-filled moments in January when I stood over the prophet's body and watched him breathe his last ungodly breath. And I never will." The next book that I have is The Darkest Star by Jennifer L. Armentrout. This is a YA science fiction novel, and it is a spin-off to the Luck series. I reached for this book series because it caught me in a place of vulnerability. At the time, I was contemplating rereading the Luck series just because I remembered how much I loved it when I was younger, but at the same time, I was afraid. I was petrified. because I didn't want to ruin the idea of it. I don't know if you've gone through this, but sometimes I've reread books from the past and it really gives me a perspective of what my reading tastes were like before. But basically, this series follows some of the characters that were mentioned in like the last books of the Lux series. Honestly, I don't remember much because it's been years since I read it and I don't remember the character ever being mentioned, but I know he was. So this book follows Evie, which is the daughter of Sergeant Jason Dasher, who fought in the war between the Lux and the Aurum. That could have been a spoiler for the Lux series and I'm so sorry. So he died, but the Lux won, and so they were slowly integrated into society. However, there's still a lot of prejudiced people who do not like them, and a lot of restrictions are put on the Lux to limit their power basically to nothing. So one day Evie goes with her friend to this club called For Token, who is owned by this guy named Luke. And while she is there, she gets to meet Luke, and basically their interaction kind of unfolds this whole series of mysteries about her life, and realizes that she's probably not who she thinks she is. That's what this book follows. I feel like if I say more, I'll just spoil you, and honestly the plot of this book is like hanging by a thread because I also got the sequel to it called The Burning Shadow, and I just cannot wait for the wrap up because I have so much to say about these two books. The 9th book that I have is A Reaper at the Gates by Sabaa Tahir. This is the 3rd book from the series. Now this is a book I have to blame for because if it weren't for this, I would not have bought 15 plus books from BookOutlet, okay? Do I regret it? No. This year I decided to reread The Ember in the Ashes series because I read it back when I was in high school and I had the sequel just standing there on my bookcase for years, and so I finally decided to just reread the whole thing and, you know, continue on. Since it is the 3rd book from the series, I cannot explain to you what it is about, but let me just rant to you a little bit, and it's about these book covers. Okay, so this is the first book cover, right, which I love this book cover. Let's say that you read this book and you know who the characters are, so naturally when you get to this book, based on the descriptions that the author gave, you'll know who they are. Is it focusing? Is it focusing? And so then you reach for the 3rd book. It's like, I mean, do I even need to read this book? Like, based on these covers, you could kind of guess where the plot is going. And side note, I also hate this with book titles. For example, there's this really famous duology from Gail Forman, and the first book is called If I Stay. And now, it leaves you to wonder, well, does the character stay due to the circumstances that she is facing? But then you get the 2nd book, and you know what it's called? Where She Went. And it's like, I mean, she had to have stayed to go somewhere. Anyways, I cannot explain to you what the 3rd book is about, but I can kind of explain to you what the first one is about. So I don't know if I mentioned it already, but this is a YA fantasy series. It is a dual perspective. However, as you progress throughout the story, you get more perspectives, which, I mean, I don't mind because they're actually interesting. This follows a 17-year-old scholar girl called Leia. She involves herself with a rebel group to save her brother from the clutches of the Empire. Meanwhile, there is Elias Ventress, who is a mask in the school. However, he wants to escape because he does not agree with the morals that are taught in this school. And so the goals of these two characters overlap, and Leia has to decide if she wants to work with the person who represents her lifelong oppressor and vice versa. The following book is All Your Perfects by Colleen Hoover. I mean, honestly, anything written by my queen, I will get. I'm not a very big fan of romance novels. However, her books never disappoint. If you ever read at least one book from her, you'll know that it's a ride. And so I don't need to know the synopsis of this book. I just know that it will take over my life for 2 days, and I'm excited, honestly. The next book that I have is Finding Audrey by Sophie Kinsella. This book was so hyped in BookTube when I first started watching it, and I just never reached for it because sometimes the hype just ruins any curiosity that I could possibly have for a book. But many years have passed now, and I feel like it interests me now, mostly because it deals with social anxiety, and also I know that it is a funny novel and it's pretty short, which is perfect as a palate cleanser because sometimes these heavy fantasy books really weigh down on you. The only worry that I have is that it'll be very juvenile, and I guess I have to read it to find out. The next book that I have is This Song Will Save Your Life by Layla Sales. I'm not really sure what it is. All I know is that it has to deal with some kind of song, which is music, and it is a book that's just combining my two favorite things in the world. This is why I picked it up. It seems like like a very hard-hitting YA contemporary, and you know, I really want to cry. The next book that I have is The Hating Game by Sally Thorne. I read this book and I'm super excited to talk about it in my wrap-up. It took over my life. This is an adult romance novel, and this book has a hate-to-love relationship between the two characters, and they're both co-workers who are fighting for the same job position. And that's basically it. The next book that I have is Tiger Lily by Jodi Lynn Anderson. Now, I've been meaning to buy this book because Naya from Naya Reads and Smiles is always talking about this book and how basically it just destroyed her emotionally. And like I told you before, I want a book that just like rips me apart, and I feel like this book has the potential. So this is one of the books that gives you a perspective of one of the side characters from a really popular book / movie, Peter Pan. I don't know who she is because I've never seen Peter Pan, or really I haven't seen most Disney movies. Fun fact about me is that I had no childhood when it comes to movies or TV shows. Any princess movie. I just saw The Lion King recently, which honestly, it wasn't worth the hype. But anyways, I really only read one sentence from the synopsis of this book, and it was enough for me to want to pick it up. Just based on that one sentence, I could kind of guess where the story is going. I'm just gonna read this one sentence to you as well. And before Peter Pan belonged to Wendy, he belonged to the girl with the crow feather in her hair, Tiger Lily. So basically, this is how Wendy just stole her man. The next book that I have is Wolf by Wolf, One Girl's Mission to Win a Race and Kill Hitler by Ryan Rodden. It's pretty self-explanatory. I got this book because I'm trying to explore other genres, one of them being historical fiction. However, I recently found out that there's some kind of shape-shifting into this book, and I don't know what qualifies as historical fiction, as I never read it before, but I feel like now there's some fantasy elements to it. So the next book, however, is historical fiction, and it is called My Lady Jane by 3 authors called Cynthia Hand, Roddy Ashton, Jody Meadows. Clearly, I'm stuck in 2016 booktube, if you haven't noticed. The reason why I got it, besides it being historical fiction, is because I remember people saying that it was a hilarious book, and honestly, that's something that I'm gonna need after reading a book like Tiger Lily. So the synopsis follows 3 individuals. A King Edward, who is a 16-year-old that is about to die. The second character is Jane, who is more emotionally invested in her book than she is in real life romances, which me. But Edward, her cousin, said, y'all hear something? And he arranged a marriage for her. The third person or animal that we follow is Gifford. Is Gifford? It's a horse, okay? Which honestly has like the potential to be one of the most iconic characters I'll ever read about. So basically, this book follows all 3 of them when they hear a dangerous conspiracy about the fate of their kingdom. So they have to formulate a plan to save it, and basically this plot follows them trying to execute this crazy plan. And yeah. The next book that I have is a classic. Like I said, I'm trying to explore other genres other than fantasy or science fiction. And so I got The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. I was in the fence between this one and another book, but the reason why I got this one is because I saw this picture and I was like, why is Franz Liszt on the cover of this book? Now, Franz Liszt is this virtuoso pianist.
Que pendeja soy.
From the 1800s, and he is the one that composed one of the most beautiful piano pieces in my opinion, and I will fight anyone on this. Actually, you should go hear this song right now. It's called Un Sospiro, and it is just so beautiful. I remember in class when I was learning about this composer, my professor was saying how girls were just like on their knees for him, and he was kind of a player, being like, what am I to do if women offer me these treats? It would be rude for me to decline. And I was like, I mean, like, he can't be that good. And so he played this song, and I found myself like this in my desk because I was just so mesmerized by this song. It was just beautiful, and you have to hear it. Basically, I'm trash for Franz Liszt, and he was on this cover, and so I bought it. What I know about this book is that Dorian has this new understanding of how beautiful he is, and he doesn't want it to fade. So Dorian expresses his desire to sell his soul for eternal beauty. So someone paints this picture of him, and instead of him growing old, the picture gets more old and it fades with each sin that he commits. That's what I know of it, and I'm excited to pick this up. The next book is from the website called AbeBooks. Now, I'm sure everyone and their mom has heard of this series. And it is Clockwork Angel by Cassandra Clare from the Infernal Devices trilogy. Now, you see, I remember myself saying that I would never pick up this book, but I don't know what has gotten into me that I had to buy it. And also, the spine for this is just so much better than the original book cover for this trilogy. It kind of reminds me, well, like, not the design, but it reminds me of that box set from Harry Potter where if you put all the spines together, it creates the castle. I think it's the Hogwarts. I'm not really sure. I never read the book series. Why do I feel like I just confessed to a sin? But anyways, this is a YA fantasy novel, and I know it follows 3 main characters. I don't know the synopsis to it, and I feel like if I think about it enough, I will, but I don't want to think about it because I know I've heard so many spoilers for this trilogy, and I don't want to remember. And so I'm gonna leave it at that. Fortunately, everyone knows about this book, so I'm sure you know what this book is about. Final 2 books are from Amazon, and now this next one, I am sure like you've heard of this book. No doubt about it, and it is from my queen, and it is A House of Earth and Blood. It is the first book from the Crescent City series. Like, it's beyond me why they would have the name of the series bigger than the actual title of the book, but whatever. This is her first book from her new adult book series, and I really want to get into new adult books, so if you have any recommendations, please let me know, because I really want to get into it. All I know is that it's some kind of mystery book. There's a really slow burn romance. It follows a girl named Bryce who is trying to find the person who murdered her friend, I think. And because I feel like I'm just making that up, but I just know that it has a great variety of creatures. I also heard that it has a really slow beginning due to all the world building, but they'll be like, just wait until you get to page 700 and then it gets real good. I'm like, isn't this book like 750 pages though? Okay, and the final book is Muse of Nightmares by Leonie Taylor. This is the second book from the duology, the first book being Strange the Dreamer. Since this is the second book from the duology, I cannot describe to you what the synopsis of this book is, but I can describe to you what this one is about. This is set in a very magical, whimsical world where we follow Laszlo. Am I saying that right? Anyway, we follow the main character named Laszlo, who is an orphan and a junior librarian who is obsessed with stories. And since he was 5 years old, he's been wanting to visit this mythical lost city named Weep. One day, the opportunity presents itself. A god slayer and all his army come to the city where Laszlo lives in, and he's trying to recruit people to take back to his lost city, Weep. And basically, these people are supposed to solve a problem, but the god slayer doesn't disclose what this problem is until they reach the city. And as a result, Laszlo has the task to figure out what happened to Weep so many years ago, and that's where I'm gonna leave it. You need to pick up this book. The writing is just beautiful. It's so lyrical and poetic, and you gotta pick it up. Alright, so that was the last book from this book haul. Let me know if you read any of these books before and which one I should pick up next. Thank you so much for watching if you've lasted this long. And if you didn't find this video a complete waste of your time, please hit the like button. If you are looking forward to any future videos of mine, please subscribe. Please stay safe and take care. Goodbye.